She was 20 years old and she was homeless. No family who would open a door for her. No plan beyond the bench at the bus station. Just a small canvas duffel, a silver pocket watch on a worn leather cord around her neck, and $10 folded into the inside pocket of her father's old pea coat. And, with that $10, every cent she had left in the world, she bought an abandoned train depot at the end of a forgotten branch line in the Allegheny foothills of central Pennsylvania. A township so small it had stopped appearing on the state highway map back in 1972. The roof over the freight room had caved in. The waiting room windows had been boarded shut for 65 years. The county said the building had been closed since 1958 and was scheduled to be torn down that spring. But what nobody knew, not the county clerk who stamped her deed, not the old men in the town diner who watched her sign her name, not even Cora Whitfield herself, when she first turned the brass key in the lock, was that beneath the floor of the old ticket booth, in a sealed wooden compartment that hadn't been opened in over 65 years, there was something waiting. Something a dying man had left there in June of 1958 for her, and it would change the rest of her life. To understand how she got there to a bench in the Scranton Greyhound Terminal at 11:43 on a Tuesday night in February with nothing but a duffel bag and a pocket watch and the $10 folded into the inside pocket of her father's coat, you have to go back. Not far, just 3 months. Back to a little row house on Linden Street. That coat still smelled like him even after 7 years. Diesel. And the particular sweetness of rail yard dust. The kind of smell that lives in the wool fibers of a man's work coat for as long as the coat lasts, and maybe longer. Cora pressed her face into the collar at the bus station that night. Just for a second. Then she stopped, because crying was a private weather, and the lobby of the Scranton Greyhound Terminal was not a private place. A man 2 benches over was eating a sandwich out of a paper bag. A woman in a red coat was sleeping sitting up. The fluorescent lights hummed, and Cora sat very still, with her duffel between her feet, and she thought about how a person becomes homeless in increments. Not all at once, not in a single dramatic moment, but by degrees. The way a porch step rots. The way a railroad tie goes soft in the middle, long before it splits. 3 months ago, she had still been calling that row house on Linden Street home. 2 months ago, she had still been telling herself her mother would come around. 6 hours ago, she had walked up the front steps after a closing shift at the diner and seen the cardboard box on the porch. And now she sat in a bus station with $10 and a pocket watch. A railroad family, 3 generations deep, and not one of them left to take her in. The Whitfields had worked the rails of eastern Pennsylvania for as long as the rails had been there to work. Her grandfather, Caleb Whitfield, had been a brakeman on the Pennsylvania Railroad's Pocono Division from 1949 until Penn Central was reorganized into Conrail in 1976. And then for Conrail itself until he retired in 1981. 32 years on the cabooses of freight trains, through every kind of weather Pennsylvania could offer up. Snow, sleet, the black ice that forms on a cattle guard at 4 in the morning when the temperature drops below 10. He had grown up, the youngest of 7 children, in a coal patch house in Lackawanna County. He had quit school at 15 to take a job on the section gang because his father had died of black lung and the family had needed the wages. His hands had been the size of skillets. His handwriting had been small and slanted and careful, like a man writing a love letter, even when he was just writing a grocery list. He had carried a flat-topped silver pocket watch on a worn leather cord in the breast pocket of his denim work shirt every day of his working life. Set to railroad time, accurate to within 10 seconds a year. That watch was around Cora's neck now, It had been around her neck for 7 years. It ticked against her collarbone in the fluorescent light, and she pressed her palm flat against her sternum to feel it. And she thought about Caleb, and she thought about her father, and she thought about how a watch keeps time, even when the person who wound it is gone. A watch is patient. A watch does not forget what it is for. Her father, Emmett Whitfield, had grown up listening to Caleb's stories at the kitchen table in the little Scranton row house. He had told everyone he was going to do something different, something cleaner, something with a tie and a desk. He had lasted 2 years at an insurance office downtown. 2 years. Then, one Monday morning in 1998, he had walked into the office, set his nameplate on his desk, walked back out and applied for a job on the Conrail track maintenance crew that same afternoon. He had told Caleb that night at the kitchen table that the office had felt like wearing somebody else's coat. Caleb had nodded, just once. Then he had slid the silver pocket watch across the kitchen table and told his son to keep it on him, because a railroad man should always know what time it is. Emmett married a woman named Adelaide Hollis in the spring of 2000. She had gone by Della from the day they met. Cora had been born the following autumn. For the first 12 years of her life, her father came home every evening with grease on his hands, with the sweet diesel smell of the rail yards in his hair, with a smudge of cinder on the brim of his cap that he never quite remembered to wipe off. He taught her how the switches worked. He taught her the names of the different kinds of freight cars: boxcars, gondolas, hoppers, tank cars, reefers. He taught her how to read a schedule, how to listen for the long, low whistle of a southbound, how to put your ear flat against a rail in summer and hear a train coming from 2 miles off. He taught her that the railroad was the most honest kind of work there was, because steel does not lie, and gravity does not lie, and a train will arrive at a place at a particular time, or it will not, and there is nothing else to discuss. He died in March of the year she turned 12. A freight derailment on a cold morning in the cut north of Pittston. The Conrail incident report said the cause was a broken rail in a frozen tie plate. Emmett had been on the ground crew, responding to the derailment when a second car shifted off the rails above him. He was 38 years old. Caleb outlived his son by 14 months. He died on a Sunday morning in his armchair in the row house, the silver pocket watch open on the table beside him, the little second hand still moving in its endless small circle, the way it had moved on the cabooses of freight trains in 1949 and 1965 and 1980, the way it was moving now in the bus station fluorescence years later. Cora had been the only family left to inherit it. She had put it on a leather cord around her neck, the day after Caleb's funeral. She had worn it every day since. Her mother did not handle the loss well. Della had loved Emmett with the kind of total devotion that some women bring to a single man in their lives. He had been her steady ground, her North Star. The reason she got up in the morning, and the reason she put dinner on the table at 6. And when he was gone, she could not find a way to continue. For the first year, she barely left the house. For the second year, she went to a grief support group at the Methodist Church on Wyoming Avenue twice a week. That was where she met Russell Pike. Russell was 46 years old and a widower. His wife had died of cancer 2 years before. He was tall and tidy and quiet. He had a way of standing in a doorway with his hands clasped behind his back that reminded Della of a funeral director. And at first she had found it comforting, because funeral directors know how to be in the presence of grief without flinching. Within 6 months they had married. Within 12 months he had moved into the row house on Linden Street. And within 15 months Cora had begun to understand that she was no longer welcome in the only home she had ever known. Russell was not violent, he was simply cold, the kind of cold that fills a room slowly until there is no warm corner left. He did not yell. He did not slam doors. He did not raise his voice. He only watched. He only watched Cora the way a man watches a wasp on the other side of a window, with patience, with the calm certainty that eventually the wasp would either leave on its own or it would die against the glass. He commented on the food she ate. He commented on the cost of the electricity she used. He commented once on the silver pocket watch around her neck. He said it was a strange thing for a girl to wear, particularly a girl who was not a child anymore, but was not yet a woman. Cora had not answered him. She had only pressed her palm flat against her sternum to feel it tick, and she had understood in that moment that she would have to leave that house eventually. The only question was when and how, and whether her mother would still love her on the other side of it. The answer, it turned out, was no. She got a job at 16 at a small diner near the old DL&W rail yards on Cedar Avenue, a place called Hazel's, run by a Polish-American woman in her mid-70s named Hazel Petrosky. Hazel had been widowed twice, once by a steel worker, once by a yard switchman on the Lehigh Valley. She ran the diner the way she ran her own life. Strong coffee, few wasted words, and an unspoken understanding that the people who came through her door were carrying things they did not always want to talk about. She hired Cora for the busser shift on a Tuesday afternoon and never asked a personal question for the first 6 months. By the time she finally asked one, Cora was ready to answer. The answering took nearly 4 hours, and a whole pot of coffee, and the kind of patient listening that is harder to find in this world than gold. Hazel knew Caleb's name when Cora mentioned him. She had served him eggs every Saturday morning for 12 years before he retired. She had started working the counter at the diner in 1969 when she was 18. And Caleb had been one of the first regulars to learn her name. She knew Emmett, too. She had brought a casserole to the wake. When she put these pieces together, she looked at Cora across the Formica table in the back booth, and she said, "Then this booth is yours whenever you need it. You hear me, Whitfield girl." Cora had heard her. She finished high school living mostly out of her duffel bag. Some nights at home in the row house, when Russell was working a late shift at the insurance office and the air was breathable. Some nights on the back bench in the diner kitchen after Hazel had locked up. Some nights at a friend's apartment when the friend's parents weren't paying attention. She graduated in June. She turned 18 the same week. She got a second job at a diner on Wyoming Avenue, and she tried to save what she could. The pocket watch ticked against her collarbone every day. She thought of it as her grandfather, still walking the line beside her. In February of her 20th year, she came home from a closing shift at the diner to find a cardboard box on the front porch of the row house. It was 9:47 on a Tuesday night. The temperature was 18 degrees. There was a thin crust of old snow on the porch steps that she had to brush off with the side of her boot to keep from slipping. She saw the box before she saw anything else. A medium-sized cardboard box, the flaps neatly folded, not taped, as if her mother had not been able to bring herself to tape it shut, because taping it shut would have made it final, and her mother had needed to leave herself the lie that she might still open it again in the morning and put everything back. Cora walked up the steps slowly. She set her duffel bag down beside the box. She lifted the flaps. Inside were her clothes, folded, some of them folded badly, some of them not really folded at all, just shoved into the corners. Her textbooks, the photograph of her father in his Conrail jacket, the one that had sat on her dresser since she was 12. The frame had a small crack in the corner now, as if it had been dropped while it was being packed. A few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to her father's mother. A small gold cross, a pair of pearl earrings, a locket she had never opened, and on top of the box, set carefully in the very center, like an offering, was the silver pocket watch, which meant that her stepfather had gone into her room, and he had taken it from her dresser drawer, where she kept it on the night she did not wear it, and he had placed it on top of the box, so that she could not pretend she had been forgotten, so that she could not pretend it was a mistake, so that she would know, with the clarity of a struck bell, that this was on purpose. Taped to the front door was a folded sheet of lined notebook paper. The handwriting was her mother's. It said, "Cora, Russell and I have decided this is the best thing for everyone. You are an adult now. We need our own space. Please do not come back tonight or any night. Please do not call." Mom. Cora read the note twice. Then she folded it once and and she put it in the pocket of her father's peacoat. She tried the front door. Locked. She tried the back door. Locked. She tried the side door. The basement door from the alley. All of them locked. Every single one. Her mother had walked through the house and turned every lock, while Cora was wiping down booths at the diner 3 miles away, while Cora was counting tips into a paper cup at 8:30 in the evening. Her mother had walked the perimeter of the only home Cora had ever known and turned each lock with both hands. Cora stood on the porch in the 18-degree air, and for a moment she could not feel her fingers. She picked up the cardboard box. She put the silver pocket watch back around her neck on its leather cord. She picked up her duffel bag, and she walked the 11 blocks to Hazel's diner. With the box pressed against her chest and the duffel banging against her shin every other step, because crying was a private weather. And the corner of Cedar and Mulberry at 10:15 on a February Tuesday was not the right place. And because some things, when they happen, are too cold to cry about, they are only cold enough to walk through. 1 block, and then the next, and then the next. Hazel took one look at Cora's face through the diner window and turned the open sign to closed. She unlocked the door. She did not say anything. She just took the cardboard box out of Cora's arms and set it down on the nearest booth, and she walked Cora to the back booth in the corner. And she sat her down. And she went behind the counter and cracked 4 eggs onto the grill and dropped a handful of home fries beside them. And she poured a mug of coffee. And she set the coffee in front of Cora and said, "Eat first, then talk." Cora ate. She did not realize how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. She ate eggs and home fries and 2 slices of buttered toast. She drank 2 mugs of coffee. And then Hazel sat down across from her in the back booth, and she folded her hands on the table and she said, "All right, tell me." Cora told her. It took about 12 minutes. Hazel did not interrupt. When Cora was finished, Hazel was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Cora started to wonder if she had said too much, or not enough, or the wrong thing. Then Hazel said, "You stay with me until you figure out what comes next. I've got a spare room above the diner that's been empty since my second husband died. It's yours." Cora opened her mouth to argue. Hazel held up one finger. "Don't," she said. "Don't even start, Whitfield girl. I've been waiting 12 years to say that sentence to somebody. You're the one I'm saying it to. So you stay." Cora closed her mouth. She nodded. Then she put her face in her hands, and she let herself shake for a moment, without sound. The closest she had come in those 7 years to falling apart. She lived in that upstairs room above Hazel's diner for 2 months. Hazel refused to let her pay rent. She said the rent was Cora working the morning shift Tuesday through Saturday, which Cora would have done for free anyway. Hazel fed her 3 meals a day. She washed Cora's clothes in the small machine in the diner basement. She left a fresh bar of lavender soap on the bathroom shelf every Sunday morning. Because Cora had mentioned once in passing that her grandmother had used lavender soap. It was the kindest 2 months of Cora's life. But Cora knew she could not stay forever. Hazel was 75 now. The diner was getting harder for her to run alone. The cook had quit in November. The dishwasher was on his way out, and Cora did not want to become a person who needed somebody else to carry her. She had been carried enough already. She started looking for a place of her own. An apartment in Scranton was out of the question on diner wages. She looked at rooms for rent in the rougher neighborhoods near the old yards, and she could not bring herself to take any of them. Not because she thought she was too good for them, but because they all had the same particular smell, the smell of a place where nobody intended to stay. And Cora had spent 7 years not intending to stay. She wanted more than anything to find a place where she could intend to stay. She did not know what that would look like. She only knew it was not a 3rd-floor walk-up on Mulberry Street. Then one evening in the back booth with a cup of coffee on the old laptop that Hazel kept on the counter for the customers to use, Cora typed cheapest property Pennsylvania into a search engine, just to see what came up. She did not have any intention of buying anything. She had $10. What she had was a sort of curiosity. The kind of curiosity a person has when she has spent 2 months sleeping in a borrowed room above a borrowed diner and she needs to remember that the world is bigger than the 11 blocks between Cedar Avenue and Linden Street. The 5th result was a county surplus auction page from a place called Penn Forest Township, the Allegheny foothills, north of Bedford. The page listed 11 abandoned buildings being sold for nominal fees ahead of a planned demolition. A Grange Hall, a 1-room schoolhouse, a creamery, a blacksmith shop, a dance pavilion, and near the bottom of the list, a building described as former Penn Central/PRR branch line depot. Hollow Creek Junction, abandoned 1958, scheduled for demolition spring of next year. The price was $10. Cora sat very still. She read the listing 3 times. A train depot. Her $10. A train depot. She felt the pocket watch tick against her collarbone, and for a moment she could not separate the ticking from her own heartbeat. She showed the listing to Hazel the next morning. Hazel was wiping down the front counter with a rag and a bottle of Windex. She set the rag down. She put on her reading glasses. She leaned over the laptop and read the listing slowly, the way she read everything, carefully, with her lips moving slightly on the harder words. Then she looked up, and something in her face changed. It was not surprise. It was something quieter than that. The look of a woman who has been carrying a secret for a long time and has just realized that the moment to set it down has finally arrived. "Whitfield girl," Hazel said. "Yes, that's the line your grandfather wrote in 1953. Cora did not say anything. Hazel sat down on the stool behind the counter. He had a temporary assignment to the Bedford branch the summer of '53, 6 weeks. He used to tell me about Hollow Creek Junction. He said the station agent there made the best coffee on the division. He said it was the loneliest stop on the line. He said, You could stand on the platform at midnight and hear the river, but not a single other thing. Hazel paused. She took off her reading glasses. She folded them and set them down on the counter. And he said one other thing, Cora. What? He said that one day that depot was going to find the person it needed. Cora's mouth went dry. He said what? He said the station agent there, Wendell Ashby, his name was a patient kind of man. The kind who served coffee at 5 in the morning to brakemen who didn't need to be served. The kind who never said much, but when he did say something, it stayed said. Hazel looked at Cora. Your grandfather told me Wendell Ashby once said that a small station is a patient thing. That it waits for the train, and then it waits for the next train, and then eventually it waits for whoever comes next. Whoever comes next, Cora repeated. Whoever comes next, Hazel said. The diner was quiet. The coffee maker hissed once on the back counter. The fluorescent light over the register hummed. And then Hazel did something Cora had never seen her do. She reached up and unpinned a small folded square of paper from the corkboard behind the register. The corkboard had been there for as long as Cora had worked at the diner. It were covered in receipts and phone numbers on torn-off napkins, in a postcard from Hazel's sister in Tampa, in a yellowed church bulletin from 1987, and in the upper left corner, pinned with a single brass thumbtack, was a folded square of paper that Cora had noticed 100 times and never asked about, because some things on a corkboard are not meant to be asked about. They are just meant to be left where they are. Hazel unfolded the paper. She handed it across the counter. Cora took it. The paper was thin, almost translucent at the creases. The kind of cheap order pad paper a diner uses for tickets in the early 80s. The handwriting was small and slanted and careful. She knew it before she could read it. It said, Hazel, thank you for the coffee, 12 years of it. If my granddaughter ever comes through that door, see that she gets a booth and a square meal. She'll be the one that looks like she's been walking in cold weather. Caleb Whitfield, May 14th, 1981. The day he had retired, the day Hazel had served him eggs for the last time at the counter. Cora's hand began to shake. The paper trembled between her fingers. The small, slanted handwriting blurred, and the silver pocket watch ticked against her collarbone in the same patient rhythm it had ticked when Caleb wrote that note. In the same patient rhythm it had ticked the morning he died, with it open on the table beside him. She looked up. Hazel was crying, quietly, without sound. The way a woman cries when she has been waiting more than a decade to deliver a piece of paper to a girl, and the girl has finally arrived. Why didn't you tell me? Cora whispered. Because he didn't tell me to give it to you on a Tuesday in February. Hazel reached across the counter and put her hand over Cora's. He told me to give it to you when the right moment came. And Whitfield, girl, this is the right moment. I have known it was the right moment since I opened your laptop and saw the word Bedford. Cora could not speak. She read the note again. She'll be the one that looks like she's been walking in cold weather. He had known. Somehow, in some way that had nothing to do with logic or sense or the ordinary rules of how time works. Caleb Whitfield, on the last day he had walked into a diner as a working brakeman of the Conrail line, had known that one day his granddaughter would walk into that same diner in cold weather, with no place to go, and he had left her a note, on a piece of order pad paper, pinned to a corkboard, for 45 years. She came as close as she had ever come to crying, but she did not, because her grandfather had not been a man who cried, and she had inherited his hands and his watch and his particular kind of restraint. But she said aloud to Hazel and to the empty diner and to whoever might be listening from whatever far country the dead listen from, "All right, Grandpa, I'll go." She bought the bus ticket the next morning. Scranton to Bedford, 2 transfers, 11 hours. Hazel insisted on driving her to the station. She insisted on packing a paper sack of sandwiches and a thermos of coffee. She insisted on standing on the platform until the bus pulled away. The morning was the kind of cold that gets inside the seams of a coat. The pocket watch ticked against Cora's collarbone. She sat by the window with her duffel between her feet. The folded note from her grandfather in the inside pocket of the peacoat. The $10 bill folded in beside it. $10, a pocket watch, a note from a dead man, and the address of a train depot at the end of a forgotten branch line. The bus pulled out of Scranton at 6:42 in the morning. 6:42, the same time she would later learn that the last eastbound train had pulled into Hollow Creek Junction on a Friday evening in June of 1958. The same time that a station agent named Wendell Ashby had chalked onto a small blackboard inside a ticket booth. The same time that had been waiting for her for 65 years in a sealed wooden compartment beneath the floor of that booth. A patient time, a railroad time, accurate to within 10 seconds a year. She did not know any of that yet. She only knew that the bus was moving, that the sun was coming up over the rooftops of Scranton in a pale gray winter light, that somewhere in the foothills west of here, a small abandoned station was sitting in a clearing, with its boarded windows and its caved-in freight room roof. And it was waiting. It had been waiting since 1958. It had been waiting through the Eisenhower years and the Kennedy years, through Watergate and the Bicentennial, through the bankruptcy of Penn Central in 1970 and the rise of Conrail, through the building of the interstate that had killed the branch line for good, through every winter and every spring of 65 long years, and on the morning of the second Wednesday of February, with the temperature at 12 degrees and the sky the color of old pewter, the bus carrying Cora Whitfield turned onto Route 6 and headed west, toward the foothills, toward the depot, toward the loose floorboards beneath a wooden stool and the tin lockbox waiting in the dark and the brown ink letter folded inside it, toward the rest of her life. The bus from Scranton to Bedford took most of a day. 2 transfers. 11 hours of small Pennsylvania towns sliding past the window. Carbondale, Hansdale, Hawley. The names of places Cora had only ever seen on old timetables her father used to keep in a kitchen drawer. The final leg was a county shuttle, a small white van with a hand-lettered sign in the front window. Penn Forest. Township. Tuesday and Thursday. Call for pickup. The driver was a man in his 70s with a beard the color of wood smoke. He looked at Cora's duffel bag. He looked at her face. He did not ask any questions. He just nodded once and said, "Get in." He dropped her at a crossroads 4 miles from the township office. 4 miles. In country where the road wound through narrow valleys of bare winter hardwood, where the air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke and the particular cold of streams running under ice. She walked. The duffel bag banged against her hip every other step. The silver pocket watch ticked against her collarbone. The $10 bill rode in the inside pocket of the peacoat folded into a small, tight square. She passed an abandoned silo. She passed a black dog watching her from the edge of a sagging fence. She passed a hand-painted sign nailed to a tree that said Hollow Creek 2 miles in faded white letters. And somewhere around the 3rd mile, she stopped feeling cold, which was a thing her father had warned her about once. He had said that when you stop feeling cold, that is when you need to start paying attention. Because the body can lie to you. The body can tell you it is fine when it is not fine. The body can pretend until it can't. She did not stop. She just kept walking, because the township office was at the end of the road, and the road only went one way from here. The Penn Forest Township office was a small frame building beside a closed general store on a single main street, with 7 other buildings on it. The front window had a hand-printed sign. Open, 2A wed, thu, hours negotiable. Inside, a woman in her 50s sat behind a counter with a mug of tea. The mug said "World's okayest clerk." The woman looked up when Cora pushed the door open. She did not look surprised, which was strange, because Cora had not called, had not written, had not sent any kind of warning. She had simply walked 4 miles down a county road and pushed open a door, and the woman behind the counter looked at her like she had been expecting her since Monday. "You'd be the one about the depot," the woman said. "Yes, ma'am. Lillian Mercer. I've been the clerk here 19 years. Cora Whitfield." Lillian looked at her over the top of her glasses. "Whitfield. Yes, ma'am." As in Caleb Whitfield. Cora's hand went to the pocket watch through the front of the pea coat. "He was my grandfather." Lillian was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up. She walked around the counter. She walked to a small shelf at the back of the office. She pulled down a leather-bound deed book that looked older than Cora's mother. She set it on the counter. She turned to a page that had been waiting apparently for a long time. "Your grandfather came through here in 1953, Lillian said. "I wasn't born yet, but my father was the clerk before me. He was the clerk for 31 years. He kept notes." She tapped the page. "There's a note in the margin of this deed that says, 'In trust until a Whitfield asks for it.'" Cora stared. "What? In trust until a Whitfield asks for it?" Lillian shrugged. "I always assumed it meant nothing. My father wrote a lot of strange things in the margins of deed books. He was that kind of man." She looked up. "But here you are." Cora's mouth had gone dry. "Wait. Yes. You're telling me the deed has been waiting for someone with my last name since 1953. That's what the margin says. Who put it there?" Lillian shrugged again. "My father did, but he wouldn't have put it there on his own. Somebody must have told him to." Cora thought very clearly. Wendell Ashby. She did not say it. She did not have to, because Lillian was already nodding as if she had heard the name without it being spoken. "Sign here, and here, and here." Cora signed. Cora Mary Whitfield, in the careful slanted hand her grandfather had taught her. Lillian took the $10 bill, folded it once, tucked it into a metal cash box, and stamped the deed with a brass stamp that made a soft, flat sound, like something settling into place. "It's yours," Lillian said. "It's 1.5 miles down the old rail bed if you walk it." She looked at Cora's boots. "You want a ride? My husband's got the truck out front." Cora wanted to walk. She did not know why. She only knew that she had walked 4 miles already, and the last 1.5 miles was hers to walk. Like a person walking up the aisle of a church. Like a person walking onto a stage. like a person walking the last 100 yards toward a thing they have been walking toward without knowing it for their entire life. "I'll walk," she said. Lillian nodded once. She did not argue. She just handed Cora the key. A long iron key, old, heavy, with a small brass tag wired to it that said Hollow Creek JCT in faded ink. "Be careful on the platform. The boards are soft on the north end. Yes, ma'am. And Cora, yes, whatever you find in there." Lillian paused. "Don't sell it, whatever it is. My father wrote that part too. Don't sell it." Cora's hand closed around the key. "I won't." The depot stood in a clearing where the rail bed widened into what had once been the Hollow Creek Junction, passing siding. A single-story building of dark red board and batten siding, faded to the color of dried clay. A wide overhanging eave that ran the length of the platform side. A peaked shingle roof with a small bay window projecting toward where the tracks had once been. A tall brick chimney rising from the back wall. The bay window was the ticket office, the place where the station agent had sat and watched for incoming trains. Above the bay window, painted in faded white letters on a dark green board, Hollow Creek JCT Pen RR. The platform was still there, made of weathered boards greened with moss. The rail bed beyond it was a long, straight scar in the woods, where the ties and the rails had been pulled up 60 years ago, the ballast still showing in patches where the leaves had not yet covered it. Cora stopped at the edge of the clearing. She set her duffel down on the ground. She looked. She looked for a long time. The sun was getting low. The light was the particular gold of a late winter afternoon, slanting through the bare branches of the hardwoods, catching the moss on the platform, catching the faded white letters above the bay window, catching the brass tag on the iron key in her hand. And she thought, he sat here, my grandfather, in June of 1953. He sat on this platform. He drank coffee that Wendell Ashby made him. He looked at this same chimney, this same eave, this same bay window, and he told a clerk in town in trust until a Whitfield asks for it. He knew, somehow, he knew there would be one of us. She walked the last 20 feet to the platform. She climbed the 3 wooden steps. She turned the iron key in the padlock on the waiting room door. The padlock was rusted. It resisted for a moment. Then it gave. The door swung inward, and Cora Whitfield walked into the Hollow Creek Junction depot for the first time. The waiting room was a single long room, a slate floor, scuffed soft by 60 years of feet that had stopped scuffing it in 1958. Dark wainscoted walls, a wooden bench running the length of one wall, a black pot-bellied stove in the corner, a small frame timetable still hanging crooked on a nail beside the bench. The corners curled, the paper foxed brown. At the far end of the room, the closed wooden door of the ticket booth, set into the wall beneath the bay window. The air smelled like cold cinder and old paper, and the faint sweet smell of pine boards that have been waiting in the dark for a very long time. Cora walked the length of the room slowly. She put her hand on the cold iron of the pot-bellied stove. She put her hand on the wooden bench. She put her hand on the closed door of the ticket booth. And she turned the brass knob. It opened. The ticket booth was maybe 6 feet square. A high wooden agent's desk faced the bay window. A tall wooden stool stood behind the desk. A row of pigeonholes was built into the wall above the desk. A small iron safe with a combination dial sat in the corner. And on the wall behind the desk, a small slate chalkboard mounted on 2 screws. The last entry was still ghosted onto the slate in faint white chalk. 6:42 p.m. Eastbound. Final. Cora stopped breathing for a second. 6:42. The same time the bus had pulled out of Scranton that morning. Coincidence. She told herself. Just coincidence. The world is full of small numbers that repeat. There is no meaning in it. Except she did not believe that. Not anymore. She slid up onto the wooden stool behind the desk. The stool was the right height. Of course it was. It had been built for a man who was about her size. Wendell Ashby had been 5'7". She would learn that later, from his obituary in the Bedford Gazette. She sat on his stool. She looked out through the bay window, at the empty rail bed running away into the trees, and she thought about her grandfather, who had sat on a stool exactly like this one, in a depot exactly like this one, when he was younger than she was now. She slid off the stool to look at the floor underneath it. The floorboards in the ticket booth were old pine, the same as the rest of the building. But the boards directly beneath the stool were a slightly different color than the surrounding boards, darker, as if they had been replaced at some point and had aged differently. Cora knelt down. She ran her fingertips along the seam where the darker boards met the lighter ones. She felt a gap, a deliberate gap, smooth cut, the kind of gap that does not happen by accident. She went back out into the freight room. She found a piece of flat iron on the floor, near the old freight scale. It might once have been part of a switch lever. It was the right shape for prying. She came back. She used the flat iron to pry up the edge of the dark boards. They came up together, in a small section about 18 inches square, hinged on a single pair of leather hinges that had hardened with age, but had not broken. Underneath was a small wooden compartment fitted into the floor joists. Inside the compartment, lying on a piece of old oilcloth, were 3 things: a tin lockbox, a sealed envelope, a folded American flag. Cora's hands were shaking now. She lifted them out one at a time. She set them on the agent's desk in the order she lifted them. The tin lockbox was heavy, the kind of small, fireproof box a station agent might have used to keep the day's cash before the night train. The envelope was thick paper, the ink on the front faded brown, addressed in a careful, slanted hand. To whoever finds this. The flag was a small 48-star flag, neatly folded in the triangular military fold, which meant it dated from before 1959. She opened the lockbox first. Inside, in neat rows, were bundled banknotes, old-style United States currency from the 1930s, the 1940s, the 1950s, 20s and 50s, and a small stack of hundreds, held together with paper bands that crumbled at the edges when she touched them. She counted slowly, twice. The total was $9,320. Beneath the bills was a small leather pouch. Inside the pouch were 11 silver dollars, each one wrapped in tissue paper, and a railroad pocket watch, a Hamilton 992B, in a silver hunting case. The standard timepiece of every Pennsylvania railroad agent and conductor, identical in make and model to the one that had hung around her grandfather's neck for 32 years. She set the watch on the desk. She set it next to her grandfather's watch, which she had taken off and laid on the desk while she worked. 2 silver pocket watches, side by side. on a wooden desk that had not held a watch in 65 years. She did not breathe. Then she opened the envelope. The letter was written on heavy cream paper. The ink was brown with age, but the handwriting was clear and careful. The hand of a man who had spent his life filling out waybills and timetables in a small, neat slant. To whoever finds this, my name is Wendell Ashby. I have been the station agent at Hollow Creek Junction on the Bedford branch of the Pennsylvania Railroad from 1932 until today, the 17th of June, 1958. The branch line is being closed at the end of this week. The last passenger train will run on Friday evening. After that, the rails will be pulled and the building will be locked and there will be no reason for anyone to come here again. I am 64 years old. My wife Imogene passed in the influenza spring of 1949. I have spent my life at this small junction watching trains come in from Bedford in the morning and go out toward Pittsburgh at night. And I have known every regular passenger by name. And I have made a pot of coffee every morning at 5 for the brakemen on the through freights, even though it was not part of my duties. I considered it my duty anyway. Coffee is a small kindness, and a small kindness on a cold morning is sometimes the difference between a good day and a hard one. I have saved a portion of every paycheck I ever drew in this lockbox beneath the floor of the booth where I have sat for 26 years. I do not trust banks. I lost what little I had in the failure of the Bedford Trust in 1933, and I have nowhere else to put what I have saved. The silver dollars are from Imogene's family. The Hamilton watch was issued to me by the railroad in 1934. I am leaving it behind because I do not want to carry railroad time after Friday. A man who is no longer a railroad man has no business pretending to know what time the train is coming. If you are reading this letter, you came into this depot after I am gone. Maybe long after. Maybe the building has been forgotten. Maybe you came looking for shelter, or quiet, or a place to begin again.
Whatever brought you here, I want you to know that the depot has been waiting for you. A small station is a kind of patient thing. It waits for the train, and then it waits for the next train, and then eventually, when there are no more trains, it waits for whoever will come next. I have been the one waiting at Hollow Creek Junction since 1932. I am leaving the waiting to you now. Take what is in this box. It is for you. The flag is from Imogene's brother, who was a brakeman on the Erie and was killed in a coupling accident in 1944. Keep it folded the way I have folded it. Be kind to the building. The coffee tastes better here than anywhere on the division. I do not know why, and I have stopped trying to find out. Wendell Ashby Station, Agent Hollow Creek Junction, June 17th, 1958. Cora read the letter twice. She read it a third time. Then she folded it carefully along its old creases and placed it back in its envelope. She sat down on the floor of the ticket booth. She put the envelope on her lap, the flag beside her knee, the lockbox in front of her, the 2 silver pocket watches on the agent's desk above her head. But she said aloud, to the empty depot, and to whoever might be listening from whatever far country the dead listen from, thank you, Mr. Ashby. A pause. I will try. She slept that first night on the wooden bench in the waiting room. She built a small fire in the pot-bellied stove. With kindling she found behind the depot, and a copy of the Bedford Gazette from October 1958 that she found folded in a corner. She wrapped herself in the wool blanket from her duffel. She put the silver pocket watch on the bench beside her head. She put the Hamilton 992B on the bench beside the silver pocket watch. 2 watches, side by side, ticking in the dark, in the same patient rhythm, as if they had been waiting 65 years to tick in a room together again. She did not sleep much.
But she did not feel afraid, which was strange, because she had been afraid for so many years, in so many small ways. Afraid in her stepfather's house, afraid on the cold porch in February, afraid every time she opened her wallet and counted what was left, afraid every time Hazel asked her gently what her plan was and Cora had to admit she did not have one. But on the floor of the depot, with the fire in the stove, and the 2 watches on the bench, and the folded flag in her duffel, she was not afraid. She was tired and cold and small, but she was not afraid. Somewhere outside, an owl called twice from the woods. Hollow Creek itself ran in the dark beyond the rail bed, low and steady the way it had run when Wendell Ashby lay listening to it on the night of June 17, 1958. The depot held her. That was the only word for it. The depot held her. And she slept. The rebuilding began the next morning. She walked back to town. She bought a notebook and a pencil at the closed-on-Mondays general store that was miraculously open on a Wednesday. She walked back to the depot. She sat on the platform with the notebook on her knee and made a list of every single thing that needed doing. The roof over the freight room had to be reframed and reshingled before the spring rains. The bay window had to be reglazed. The pot-bellied stove needed its flue cleaned. The well behind the depot had to be checked. The list ran to 4 pages. She did not spend Wendell Ashby's money recklessly. She drove with Lillian Mercer's husband to the credit union in Bedford. She opened an account. She put most of the money in, and she withdrew only what she needed, in small, careful amounts. A bundle of cedar shingles, a bucket of roofing tar, a second-hand kerosene cook stove, a proper mattress, a wool blanket, 2 pairs of work gloves, a claw hammer, a handsaw, a box of galvanized nails. She learned to shingle a roof by watching a video on the library computer in Bedford, and by making mistakes, and by correcting them. She learned to hang a new door by asking the old man at the diner in town, a retired carpenter named Arlen Halverson, who came out one Saturday with his own tools and showed her how to set the hinges. Harlan was 71 years old. He had hands like Caleb's, big and steady. He had a gray mustache and a leather tool belt that had been on his hip for 46 years. He worked for 2 hours. He drank 2 cups of the coffee Cora made on the new kerosene stove. When he was finished, when the door swung true on its new hinges, he stood back. He looked at it. He looked at Cora. He said, "You're doing all right, kid." That was all. But Cora carried that sentence around inside her for 3 days afterward, like a small, warm coal in the pocket of her peacoat. The people of Penn Forest Township began to notice her. Lillian came by every Wednesday with a thermos of coffee and the township newsletter. Harlan came back twice more on Saturdays to help with the bay window. He refused to let her pay him. He said the work was its own pay. He said when a man my age gets to put glass back in a depot window, that is its own kind of wage. A retired Conrail engineer named Earl Dempsey, who lived 4 miles away in a small cabin, and had heard from Lillian that a young woman was reopening the Hollow Creek depot, drove out one afternoon in his old Ford pickup. He had a wooden crate in the bed of the truck. He set the crate on the platform. Inside were things he had been keeping in his attic for 40 years. Old timetables, a brass conductor's lantern, a Pennsylvania Railroad porcelain mug, white with the green PRR keystone, a section of original rail with the date 1928, stamped into the web. Earl was 68. He had a face like weathered oak. He had run the Bedford branch his last 3 years before retirement. He had stood on the platform at Hollow Creek Junction at least 100 times. He set the crate down. He looked at Cora. He said, "These belong here more than they belong with me." He came back every other Sunday for the rest of the spring, just to drink coffee on the bench, just to talk about the old line, just to sit on a platform he had thought he would never sit on again. By April, the freight room roof was tight. By May, the bay window held new glass. The waiting room had a swept slate floor and a fresh coat of pale cream paint and a row of curtains Lillian had sewn for the bay window from a bolt of unbleached muslin. Cora had made a small bedroom for herself in the freight room. The iron cot from a tag sale in Bedford. The wool blanket. A small shelf above the cot. On the shelf, the framed photograph of her father in his Conrail jacket. The folded note from her grandfather, sealed now in a plastic sleeve. Her grandfather's silver pocket watch on its leather cord, hung on a small brass hook she had screwed into the wall. The Hamilton, 992B, she kept on the agent's desk in the ticket booth, wound and set to railroad time, the way Wendell would have kept it. She started serving coffee. Not as a business, not yet, just as a thing she did, the way Wendell had done it for the brakemen on the through freights, even though it was not part of his duties. She kept a kettle hot on the pot-bellied stove. She kept a stack of mismatched mugs on the bay window shelf. And any walker who came down the old rail bed could come into the waiting room and have a cup. And there were more walkers than she expected. Hikers, birders, railroad history enthusiasts, the occasional lost backpacker. She did not charge. People left small things instead. A jar of honey, a loaf of bread, a handful of wildflowers in a mason jar, a folded $5 bill in a tin she had set on the bench. By the end of May, the depot had become something it had not been in over 60 years, which was a place where people stopped on purpose. And then, on a Wednesday in mid-May, Lillian pulled into the clearing in her green pickup truck. She climbed out. She had a manila folder under one arm, the kind of folder that has been waiting in a filing cabinet for a long time, and whose moment now has come. Cora was on the platform sanding the new bench Harlan had built her. She set the sandpaper down. Lillian climbed the platform steps. She did not speak for a moment. She just looked at Cora. Then she opened the manila folder. She took out a small newspaper clipping. Yellowed. Brittle. The edges crumbling. She handed it across. Cora took it. She read it. It was an obituary from the Bedford Gazette, dated May 8, 1959. Ashby. Wendell H., retired station agent. Penn, Forest Township. Passed peacefully at home Tuesday morning, at the age of 65 after a short illness. Mr. Ashby served as agent at Hollow Creek Junction for 26 years, preceded in death by his wife Imogene, 1949, and an infant daughter, 1942. No surviving immediate family. Funeral services. Friday at St. James Episcopal in Bedford. Father Mulvaney officiating. 11 months. He had lived 11 months after closing the depot. He had buried his wife in 1949. He had buried a daughter in 1942. And he had died alone in 1959, in a small rental house in town, with no surviving immediate family, and Father Mulvaney had read words over a coffin in a church where almost nobody had come to listen. Cora sat down on the platform bench. Hard. The obituary trembled between her fingers. For the first time since the cold February porch, For the first time since the cardboard box and the locked doors and the note in her mother's handwriting, Cora Whitfield cried. She cried in great hard breaths, with her face in her hands. On a depot platform in the Allegheny foothills of central Pennsylvania, for a man she had never met, who had served coffee at 5 in the morning to brakemen on cold mornings, who had buried a baby and a wife and a railroad, who had folded a flag and a letter and $9,320 into a tin box beneath a wooden floor on the 17th of June in 1958, and had walked out the door, and had not lasted the year. Lillian sat down beside her on the bench. She did not say anything for a long time. Then she put a hand on Cora's shoulder, and she said very quietly, "There's one more thing." Cora didn't look up. "What?" "He had a brother." Cora looked up. Wendell Ashby had a younger brother. The brother died in 1968, but the brother had a daughter, and the daughter is still alive. Cora's mouth went dry. "Where?" "In Bedford, in a nursing home off Route 220. Lillian paused. "Her name is Beatrix Ashby. Everybody who knew her younger called her Trixie. She's 94 years old now. She's alive. She's alive, mind sharp as a tack. The body is doing what bodies do at 94. But the mind." Cora wiped her face with the heel of her hand. "Does she know about the depot?" "She knows it exists. I don't know if she knows about the letter, or the lockbox, or the watches." Lillian looked at Cora carefully. "But I called her yesterday. I told her about you. I told her you found something. I asked her if she would see you." A pause. "And she said yes." Lillian's voice was very gentle. "She said she has been waiting 65 years to find out what her uncle thought about on the last day he sat at that desk." Cora put the obituary down on the bench between them. She picked up the silver pocket watch through the front of her shirt. She held it in her fist. She thought about her grandfather, in trust until a Whitfield asks for it. She thought about Wendell Ashby. "I have been the one waiting at Hollow Creek Junction since 1932. She thought about a woman she had never met, 94 years old, in a nursing home off Route 220, who had been waiting 65 years to hear her uncle's voice one more time. Cora stood up. She put the obituary in her pocket. She turned the open sign on the platform around so that it read back soon. She said, "Can you drive me Lillian?" and Lillian Mercer, who had been the township clerk for 19 years and whose father had written in trust until a Whitfield asks for it in the margin of a deed book in 1953. For reasons he had never explained to anyone, Lillian Mercer stood up. She nodded once. She said, "I've been waiting for you to ask." The nursing home off Route 220 was a low brick building with a wheelchair ramp painted yellow at the edges and a small American flag hanging limp from a pole in the front yard. Lillian parked her green pickup in the visitor lot. Cora sat in the passenger seat for a moment. She had the manila folder on her lap. Inside it, a photocopy of Wendell Ashby's letter. The original was in the iron safe back at the depot. Cora had not wanted to bring the original. Some things she had decided should not be carried in a folder past a reception desk. She had also brought one of the silver dollars from the leather pouch, wrapped in fresh tissue paper. She did not know why. She only knew it felt right. "You okay, Whitfield girl?" Lillian asked. No, ma'am. Good. That means you're paying attention. Cora almost laughed. She did not, but she almost did. Which was, she realized, the closest she had come to laughter since the February night on the cold porch. She got out of the truck. She walked up the wheelchair ramp. She signed her name in the visitor log. Cora Whitfield. To see Beatrix Ashby. Family. She paused at the word family, then she let it stand, because in some way she could not yet name it was true. Beatrix Ashby was sitting in a chair by the window. The window faced east. The morning light was on her hands. She was small, the way some very old women become small, compact, folded inward. Her white hair was cut short and brushed back. Her eyes were the pale blue of a winter sky at 4 in the afternoon. Her hands trembled, steadily, the way Parkinson's makes hands tremble, not violently, just constantly. The small, ongoing earthquake of a body that has been used for 94 years. When Cora walked into the room, Beatrix looked up. She did not speak. She just looked, for a long time. Then she said very quietly, "You have his hands." Cora stopped. "Whose hands?" "My uncle's, Wendell's. Look at them." Cora looked down at her own hands. She did not know what she was supposed to see. They were just hands. Long fingers, short nails. A small scar on the knuckle of her left index finger from a kitchen knife when she was 14. Beatrix smiled. "My father had the same hands. All the Ashby men did. I never had them. I got my mother's, but you, whoever your grandfather was, somewhere back, there's an Ashby." She paused. Sit down, dear. You're making me nervous standing there." Cora sat down in the chair across from her. She put the folder on her lap. She did not know how to begin. So Beatrix began for her. "Lillian Mercer told me about you on the telephone." "Yes, ma'am." "She said you bought the depot." "Yes, ma'am." "For $10. "Yes, ma'am." "That is the exact amount my uncle charged for a one-way ticket from Hollow Creek to Pittsburgh in 1941. I don't suppose anyone has told you that." Cora shook her head. "No, ma'am." Beatrix nodded once. "Well, now you know." She held out one trembling hand. Cora understood. She unzipped the folder. She took out the photocopy of the letter. She put it into Beatrix's hand. Beatrix did not put on reading glasses. She held the paper close to her face. She read it slowly, in silence. Her lips moved on the harder words, the way Hazel's lips had moved on the laptop in the diner. It took her about 6 minutes. Cora watched her face the entire time. At the line about Imogene, Beatrix closed her eyes for a second. At the line about the coffee, she smiled, very faintly. At the line about a small kindness on a cold morning, she made a small sound in her throat. It was not a sob. It was something quieter than a sob. The sound a person makes when she finally hears a sentence she did not know she had been waiting most of her life to hear. When she was finished, she set the paper on her lap. She put one trembling hand flat over it. She looked at Cora. She said, "I have been waiting most of my life to know what he thought about on his last day." Cora's eyes filled. Beatrix said, "Now I know." A pause. Coffee. A longer pause. "He thought about coffee." And then she did laugh. A small, dry laugh. The laugh of a woman who has been carrying a sadness for 65 years and has just realized that the man who left her behind had been thinking at the end about how to be kind, and how strange and how merciful that was, and how like him. "Of course he did," she said. "Of course he did." She told Cora the story. She told it slowly. Because she had time, and because Cora had not asked her to hurry. Wendell and Imogene Ashby had been married in 1928. They had wanted children for a long time. They had not been able to have them. Then, finally, in the summer of 1938, Imogene had become pregnant. The baby had been born in March of 1939. A girl. They had named her Adelaide. Beatrix paused on the name. She said it twice, as if she was testing whether Cora was paying attention. Adelaide. Adelaide Ashby. She was a beautiful child. I only saw her 3 times. We lived in Pittsburgh then. My father, Wendell's younger brother, he worked the steel mills. We came out to the depot on holidays. I was 7 years old when she was born. I held her once. She had Imogene's eyes. Cora had stopped breathing. She did not know she had stopped breathing. She only knew that the room had gone very still, and the morning light on Beatrix's hand seemed to brighten and dim in a way that was probably just a cloud passing over the sun outside the east window. But it did not feel like a cloud. It felt like something else. Adelaide, Cora said, very softly. Her name was Adelaide. Yes, dear. My mother's name is Adelaide. Beatrix looked up. Her pale blue eyes searched Cora's face. Your mother? Yes, ma'am. Whitfield. Hollis. Adelaide Hollis. She goes by Della. She married my father, Emmett Whitfield. She's been Adelaide Whitfield for 26 years. Beatrix closed her eyes. She kept them closed for a long time. Then she opened them. She said, Dear God. She said it the way the woman says it when she has spent her life not believing in anything in particular. And then, one Wednesday morning, in a nursing home, off Route 220, somebody comes into a room, and the somebody's mother is named the same as the dead child of her dead uncle, and the somebody has Ashby hands, and the somebody bought a depot for the exact price of a 1941 ticket to Pittsburgh. Dear God, she said again. Cora reached across the small distance between them. She put her hand over Beatrix's trembling hand. Beatrix looked down at their 2 hands together. Same long fingers, same shape of knuckle, same scar nowhere visible but somehow there in the bones. Tell me about her, Beatrix said. Tell me about her. Tell me everything. So Cora told her. She told her about a woman who had loved Emmett Whitfield with total devotion, who had lost him at 36, who had not been strong enough to carry the weight alone, who had married a man named Russell Pike for the wrong reasons, who had locked the doors on a February night and pinned a note to the front of the house and had not opened the door since. Beatrix listened. She did not interrupt. She held Cora's hand. When Cora was finished, Beatrix said, Adelaide, Adelaide, Adelaide. And then she said, she did not know, did she? Know what? That she was named for a child who died in 1942, a child of an aunt by marriage she has never met. No, ma'am, she didn't know. Of course she didn't. Beatrix shook her head. My father didn't even speak the name after the funeral. Wendell never said it again. I don't think Imogene ever spoke it either in the years she had left. They were Lutheran. They believed certain things about silence and grief. I never agreed with them, but that was the family. She paused. Your mother was named Adelaide because your grandmother, Wendell's brother's wife, must have chosen it. Some line in the family. Some old aunt 3 generations back. Your mother was given a name, and she never knew it had already been carried and lost. She looked at Cora. Names are funny things, child. They go where they want to go. Cora's tears fell, quietly, onto the back of Beatrix's trembling hand. Beatrix did not wipe them away. She just left them there. She said, He's been waiting for you, somehow. I don't know how, but he has. Cora drove Beatrix out to Hollow Creek the following Saturday. The day was clear, the kind of late June day that exists in the foothills only a few times a year. The hardwoods full of leaf, the platform warm in the sun, Hollow Creek itself running below the rail bed in the steady musical way of small streams in summer. Beatrix had not been to the depot in over 80 years. She had not been there since her father had taken her to her infant cousin's funeral in the summer of 1942. Lillian had loaned them a folding wheelchair. Earl had built a ramp up onto the platform the night before. Harlan had come out at dawn to help Cora screw it into place. Cora wheeled Beatrix down the platform very slowly. Beatrix looked at everything: the bay window, the faded sign, Hollow Creek, JCT Pen, RR, the slate floor through the open waiting room door, the brick chimney, the bench Harlan had built, where Cora had cried for a man she had never met, where Cora was crying again now, quietly behind the wheelchair, because some things are too full to be carried in silence. Beatrix lifted one trembling hand. She pointed. That tree. Cora looked. A great white oak stood behind the depot, 60 feet tall, its lower limbs spread wide over the back of the freight room roof, its leaves making a steady summer sound in the small wind. That tree. What about it, ma'am? Wendell planted that. In 1935, Imogene used to carry water out from the well every Sunday afternoon and pour it on the roots. I remember her doing it. I remember the way she carried the bucket. She held it out from her hip so it wouldn't bang. My father used to laugh at her. He said she was going to baby that sapling to death. Beatrix smiled. It didn't die. Cora wheeled her closer to the tree. Beatrix looked up into the branches. Her old face went very still. Her trembling hand reached up, as if she wanted to touch a leaf that was 40 feet above her head. After a long moment, she said, Cora. Yes, ma'am. When I die. Ma'am. When I die, I would like to be cremated, and I would like my ashes scattered here, under this tree. Could you arrange that? Cora's throat closed. Yes, ma'am. I have a nephew in Phoenix who will sign whatever papers. I haven't seen him in 11 years. He won't care. I will leave you instructions. Yes, ma'am. This is the closest I have ever been to my uncle. Over 80 years and one Saturday morning, and I would like to stay here. After. Cora put her hand on Beatrix's shoulder. She did not trust her voice. She just left her hand there. The summer wind moved in the white oak above them. The leaves made the sound water makes over stones, and the depot held them. Both of them, the way it had held Cora on her first night on the wooden bench in the dark. The way it had held Wendell Ashby for 26 years on a wooden stool. The way a small station holds whoever walks into it. Before Cora drove Beatrix back to the nursing home that afternoon, Beatrix asked her to fetch something from the trunk of Lillian's pickup. A small wooden box. Plain, old, pine, about the size of a hardcover book, with a tarnished brass clasp on the front. Cora brought it to the platform. She set it on Beatrix's lap. Beatrix's trembling hands fumbled at the clasp. She finally got it open. Inside the box, on a small square of velvet that had once been red and was now the color of old brick, was a watch. Not a railroad watch. A small woman's watch. Gold, with a tiny enameled face and delicate filigree around the case. a Swiss-made Elgin lady's wristwatch of the kind a man bought for his wife in the late 1920s when he wanted to tell her without words that he loved her more than he could say. Wendell gave this to Imogene on their wedding day, October 11th, 1928. Cora could not speak. Imogene wore it for 21 years, until she died. Wendell could not bear to keep it after. He could not bear to look at it. So he sent it to my father, in the fall of 1957, the year before he closed the depot. Beatrix lifted the watch carefully. My father kept it in a sock drawer for 16 years. He passed it to me when I was 41. I have kept it for 53 years, in this box, in a drawer, in whatever apartment I happen to be living in. I have looked at it 3 times. She held it out, toward Cora. It belongs to you now. Cora's hands went up before she could stop them. Ma'am, I can't. Don't! Beatrix's voice was firm, the firmest it had been all afternoon. Don't say that to me, child. I have waited a long time to give this watch to somebody. I did not know who. I just knew it was not for me. And it was not for the nephew in Phoenix. It was for somebody who had not yet walked into the room. And Cora Whitfield, you have walked into the room. Cora took the watch. It was lighter than she expected. The gold was warm from sitting in Beatrix's lap. She held it in her open palm, with her grandfather's silver pocket watch under her shirt against her collarbone, with Wendell Ashby's Hamilton 992B in her duffel bag in the truck. 3 watches now. Caleb, Wendell, Imogene. 2 railroad men and a railroad man's wife, all of them waiting in their separate small ways for the cold February porch and the locked doors and the 4-mile walk down a county road. All of them waiting for the granddaughter and the niece, by impossible arithmetic, and the woman with the Ashby hands. All of them waiting for Cora. On a clear afternoon in early October, a woman walked down the old rail bed alone. Cora was on the platform pricing out shingles in her notebook. She heard the footsteps before she saw the woman. The footsteps came slowly, the way the footsteps of a person who is not sure she is welcome come slowly. Cora looked up. A woman in her late 50s, a worn coat, no makeup, hair gone gray at the temples in a way it had not been gray the last time Cora had seen her, which had been across a formica table in a row house kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon in late January. Cora's mother, Adelaide Hollis Whitfield. Della. Cora stood up, slowly. Della stopped at the foot of the platform steps. She did not climb them. She just stood at the bottom of them. She held her hands together in front of her stomach, the way a woman holds her hands when she does not know what else to do with them. Cora did not move. She did not speak, because she had imagined this moment in some form almost every night for 8 months. And in none of the imagined versions had she known what she was supposed to say. So she said nothing. She waited. Della spoke first. I left him. That was the first sentence. I left Russell. That was the second. Cora did not answer. Della's hands tightened on each other. 4 months ago, in June, I found out he had been... She stopped. She took a breath. It doesn't matter what I found out. It matters that I left. I am living in a 1-bedroom on Pittston Avenue. I am working at the laundromat on Wyoming. I am paying rent by myself. For the first time in my life, I am paying rent by myself. Cora's hand had drifted up to the silver pocket watch. She held it through the fabric of her shirt. She did not realize she was doing it. Della looked down at her own hands, then up at Cora. I came to say I was wrong. Mom. I came to say I knew I was wrong. The night I did it. I knew it as I was writing the note. I knew it as I was packing the box. I knew it as I was turning the locks. I did it anyway, because I was too tired to fight him, because I was too tired to fight myself, because I had stopped fighting for anything. She breathed in. Russell didn't ask me to push you out. He hinted, he suggested, but the locking of the doors, the note on the front door, the placing of the pocket watch on top of the box, those were mine. Cora's eyes burned. All those were mine. Cora, I want you to know that. I have been hating Russell for 9 months because it is easier to hate Russell. But I locked those doors with my own hands. Silence. Cora said, "Why are you here?" Her voice came out smaller than she meant it to. "Because I owed you the words." Della's eyes were wet, but she was not letting the tears fall. She was Adelaide Hollis. She had inherited from somewhere somehow the same kind of restraint Cora had inherited from Caleb. I am not asking for anything. I am not asking to come up the steps. I am not asking to be forgiven. I am only here to say, I locked the doors. I knew I was locking them. And I am sorry. Cora swallowed. She thought about Wendell Ashby. She thought about the letter that had said, "Whatever brought you here, I want you to know that the depot has been waiting for you." She thought about Beatrix Ashby's pale blue eyes. She thought about a baby girl named Adelaide, who had died in 1942 of whooping cough, and whose name had traveled somehow across 3 generations to land on the woman standing now at the foot of the platform steps. She reached into the pocket of the peacoat. She brought out a folded photocopy of Wendell Ashby's letter. She kept one with her now, always, in the inside pocket of her father's peacoat, the way her grandfather had carried his pocket watch in his shirt pocket every day of his working life. She walked down the platform steps. She held the letter out. "Read this." Della took it. She read it standing on the bare ground of the old rail bed, while the white oak made its small wind sound behind the freight room, while the Hamilton 992B ticked on the desk inside the booth, while Caleb's silver pocket watch ticked under Cora's shirt, while in her dresser drawer in the freight room, Imogene's gold Elgin wristwatch ticked at a different small rhythm. Della read. When she was finished, she lowered the paper. She said, "Who was he?" "He was the station agent here from 1932 to 1958. And he had a wife named Imogene. And they had a daughter. The daughter died in 1942. She was 3 years old." Della waited. "What was her name, Mom?" "I don't know, sweetheart. Her name was Adelaide." Della went very still. Cora watched it land. She watched the small impact in her mother's face, the way a person looks when something she has carried her whole life without understanding finally becomes a thing she understands. "Adelaide," Della whispered. "Adelaide Ashby, 1939 to 1942. My mother named me Adelaide because of some line in the family. She never told me where the name came from." "I know. I never knew. I know, Mom." Della put her hands over her face. She stood like that for a long time. Cora did not climb back up the platform steps. She did not move away. She did not move closer. She just stood at the bottom of the steps with her mother. in a quiet that was not a forgiving quiet, but was not an unforgiving quiet either. It was instead the quiet that comes after a long whistle far off in the woods, when the train is still coming, but you have heard it, and you know now that it is real, and you know now that you have time before it arrives to decide what you are going to do. Cora said finally, "You can stay tonight. There is a cot in the freight room. There is a wool blanket. There is coffee." Della lowered her hands. "Cora, I am not saying anything more than that. I am saying there is a cot, and a blanket, and coffee, for tonight. That's enough. You do not get to come back the way it was. Not yet. Not for a while, maybe not ever. I don't know yet. I know. You get a cot. You get a blanket. You get coffee. That's more than I asked for. I know it is." Della climbed the platform steps. Slowly. Cora did not help her up, but she did not stop her. Della reached the top. She stood on the platform for the first time in her life. On a Saturday in early October, the afternoon light slanting through the white oak, the chalk ghost of 6:42 p.m. eastbound final, still on the small blackboard inside the bay window, where it had been since 1958. She said, "It is a beautiful building, Cora." Cora said, "I know." The grand opening of Hollow Creek Junction Coffee was the second Saturday of October. There was no ribbon. There was no speech. There was a hand-painted sign Earl had nailed to the platform railing the night before that said, "Coffee, free leave, what you can." Lillian brought folding chairs from the township office. Harlan brought a fresh pot of his wife's apple butter. Earl brought a brass conductor's bell from his attic and hung it from the eave above the waiting room door. He rang it once. The sound carried out over the rail bed, and out over the river, and out into the small October sky. Hazel drove down from Scranton. She brought the framed photograph of Emmett Whitfield in his Conrail jacket, because Cora had decided it belonged on the wall of the waiting room now. Not on a shelf above a cot. In a small frame above the bench, where everyone who came in could see it. Hazel hung it herself. She used a hammer Harlan handed her. She used a nail she had brought in her own coat pocket. She stepped back. She looked at the photograph hanging straight above the bench. She said, "Emmett, look at you. Look at your girl." Cora was beside her. Hazel put one arm around Cora's shoulders. "Caleb would be proud. Emmett would be proud. You're a Whitfield girl, in the only way that matters." Cora let herself cry. This time, not silently. She cried with her whole face. Onto Hazel's shoulder, in the waiting room of a depot at the end of a forgotten branch line in the Allegheny foothills of central Pennsylvania. Della stood in the doorway of the freight room. She watched. She did not come closer, but she did not leave. She had been at the depot for 3 weeks by then. She slept on the cot. She made coffee in the morning. She washed mugs in the afternoon. She did not ask to be more than that. She did not push. She did not demand. She did every evening before she went to bed, sit on the back step of the freight room and look up into the branches of the white oak, as if she was trying to introduce herself to the family she had not known she had. Cora was not ready to forgive her. Not yet. Maybe in a year, maybe in 2, maybe in 5, but she had let her stay. And every day she did not ask her to leave was a day. And days Cora was learning were how you built a thing. On a clear evening at the very end of October, the trees gone red and yellow, the air sharp and clean, the first real frost expected that night. Cora sat on Harlan's bench on the platform. She had her grandfather's silver pocket watch in her left hand. She had Wendell Ashby's Hamilton 992B in her right hand. She had Imogene Ashby's gold Elgin wristwatch on her left wrist. All three watches read exactly the same time, accurate to the second, set to railroad time. The way they had been carried by people who had spent their lives believing that knowing the time was a kind of duty to the people who depended on you to be where you said you would be when you said you would be there. The sun was going down behind the bare ridge to the west. The light was gold. The wind was small. Hollow Creek was running in the dark below the railbed. Cora thought about her grandfather, who had ridden cabooses for 32 years and had never once been late to work, who had pinned a note to a corkboard in 1981 and said, "See that she gets a booth and a square meal." She thought about her father, who had walked out of an insurance office because the coat had felt like somebody else's, who had gone back to the only kind of work that had ever felt like his. She thought about Wendell Ashby, who had served coffee at 5 in the morning to brakemen on the through freights for 26 years, who had buried a baby and a wife and a railroad, who had folded a flag and a letter, and $9,320 into a tin box on the 17th of June in 1958, and walked out a door and not lasted the year. She thought about Beatrix, whose mind was still sharp in a chair by a window off Route 220, whose pale blue eyes had searched her face and seen something there that Cora had not known was there. She thought about Imogene, who had carried water from the well in 1935 to baby an oak tree, who had worn a gold wristwatch on her left wrist until 1949. She thought about a baby girl named Adelaide, who had been 3 years old, and whose name had crossed 3 generations, to land on the woman now sitting on the back step of the freight room, watching the same sun go down. She thought about Hazel, about Lillian, about Harlan, about Earl, about all the people who had been waiting for her, each in their own quiet Pennsylvania way, before she had known there was anyone to wait for her at all. Cora Whitfield was 20 years old. She had been homeless 8 months ago. She had spent $10 on a depot. She had found a tin box under a wooden floor, and she understood now with the slow, steady clarity of a watch wound and set to railroad time that a small station does not stop being a station just because the trains have stopped coming. A small station keeps the schedule in its bones. It keeps the coffee in its kettle. It keeps the lockbox under the floor of the booth and the flag folded in its triangular fold and the silver pocket watch wound on the desk. All the small, honest things that the last person who loved the building set down before they turned the key in the door. A small station waits. It has always waited. That is what a station is. And when the next person finally walks down the railbed in the cold carrying nothing but a duffel bag and $10 and a watch on a leather cord, the station does not need to speak, because stations do not speak. It only needs to show her the loose floorboards beneath the stool. Wendell Ashby had waited for Cora Whitfield for 65 years without knowing her name. Caleb had waited for her in the shape of a flat-topped silver pocket watch on a leather cord. Emmett had waited for her in the smell of diesel and the names of freight cars she could still recite by heart. Hazel had waited for her in the back booth of a diner in Scranton, with a folded note pinned to a corkboard for 45 years. Imogene had waited for her in the cool gold tick of a wedding day wristwatch in a pine box in a sock drawer. Beatrix had waited for her in a chair by a window in a nursing home off Route 220, and a baby girl named Adelaide, who had been 3 years old in the summer of 1942, had waited for her in the only way a baby girl who had been 3 years old in the summer of 1942 could wait, in a name. Carried forward, from one woman to another, across the years. Cora Whitfield was 20 years old, and she had been homeless. She had $10 to her name, and she spent it on an abandoned train depot in the Allegheny foothills of central Pennsylvania. It was the best $10 she ever spent. The sun went the rest of the way down behind the ridge. The bench was warm where she sat. Behind her in the open doorway of the waiting room, her mother stepped out with 2 mugs of coffee. She did not say anything. She just set 1 mug down on the bench beside Cora, and she sat down on the platform steps a few feet away, and she held her own mug in both hands. 2 women, 1 bench, a platform, a river running in the dark. The first frost of the year on its slow, patient way down out of the foothills, and 3 watches ticking together, all set to railroad time, all accurate to within 10 seconds a year, all keeping the same patient promise 3 generations of railroad people had kept before them, the promise of a small station, the promise that a place will wait, the promise that eventually the right person will come. In the years that followed, Beatrix would die in her sleep, on a quiet November night, with the staff at the nursing home saying it had been the most peaceful passing they had ever seen. Cora would scatter her ashes under the white oak Wendell had planted in 1935, and Harlan would forge a small bronze plaque on his anvil that read Beatrix Ashby, niece of the station agent, home at last. But that was still ahead, for now there was only this: the bench, the coffee, the mother sitting 3 feet away and not pushing for more, the 3 watches ticking, the depot behind them holding its long, patient silence the way it had held its long, patient silence for 65 years before Cora ever walked down the railbed in the cold. A small station waits. That is what a station is. And on a cold, clear October evening in the Allegheny foothills, a girl who had once been homeless sat on a bench her friend had built for her, drank coffee her mother had poured for her, and listened to 3 small mechanical hearts keeping the time of 3 lives that had loved her across the years. It was the best $10 she ever spent.